Hello my friends, to be informed about the new coming videos, you can support me by subscribing to my channel and liking my videos. Enjoy listening. Sometimes we want to give up playing by the rules of the game and set our own rules. Although these rules may be valid at first, they can later put you in an inextricable situation. That's why sometimes you need to leave it to the flow of life. Without striving, breaking, spilling, without tiring anyone, you need to wait quietly in a corner. What's worse is when someone other than you tries to change the rules that life has set for you, even worse results can emerge. I am in Antalya. As soon as I finished high school, my mother was pressuring me every day to find a job and work. She didn't even allow me to study. Finally, I started working in a tailor shop where I found a job. My salary is not very high. She takes every penny of the money I earned. She doesn't even leave her money. Since the road is not too far, I was walking to and from work. After working there for a while, my mother wanted me to leave there and go to a higher paying job, or I should find a second job to work. Actually, my mother was not like this before. My father treated her so badly in the past that she gave up being a good person over time. My mother is a very greedy person. There is nothing she can't do for money. One day when I opened my eyes in the morning and saw that the alarm still hadn't gone off, I looked at the clock and saw that I was half an hour late for work while in bed. I jumped out of bed and dressed quickly. I grabbed my bag and ran out of the house. I was running on the road. I couldn't stop for a moment. If I lost this job or if my salary was cut, my mother would kill me. I was out of breath from running. If I had money, I would at least go by bus. I couldn't endure any longer and slowed down. At that moment, a car stopped beside me with a young man inside. Seeing that I was trying to get somewhere in a hurry, he offered to drop me off. Without thinking, I got into the car and gave him directions. He got me to work in no time. I got out of the car so hastily that I couldn't even thank the man. The manager didn't say anything because it was my first time being late, but warned that my salary would be cut if it happened again. In the afternoon, I was a bit surprised to see the customer who came to the pastry shop. It was the man who brought me here with his car today. He entered, looked around, and when he saw me, he came over and said hello. I thanked him and asked what he wanted. He bought some cookies and a small cake. Just as he was about to leave, I said, "Excuse me, I forgot to thank you this morning for bringing me here. Thank you very much." The man smiled and said, "You're welcome." From that day on, he came to the pastry shop every day to buy something. We would chat for a few seconds and then he would leave. I had gotten used to seeing him every day. However, one day he didn't come, even though I waited until evening. After work, I saw him standing a little further away with his car. As I passed by, he got out of the car and called me, asking if I could spare some time to talk. I agreed and got into his car. While dropping me home, we briefly introduced ourselves. His name was Gökhan, a 25-year-old teacher. He said he wanted to spend some time with me and get to know me better. It was a nice offer for me. I said I would think about it and then answer. A month had passed since this conversation, and we had started dating. He would drop me off at work every day on his way to school and pick me up in the evening to take me home. Although I tried to hide it from my mother, she saw me getting out of Gökhan's car. I thought she would be angry, but on the contrary, she welcomed it nicely. However, this attitude didn't last long. Initially, she welcomed it because she thought he was financially well off seeing his car. But when she learned that he was a teacher and lived in a rented house, she told me not to see him again. This was going to be a bit difficult for me because I had become attached to Gökhan and didn't want to push him away myself. For a while, we talked and met secretly from my mother, but one day I couldn't hear from Gökhan anymore. Despite calling him many times, he didn't answer. Maybe he has work, maybe he has a lesson, maybe he is sleeping. I consoled myself with these thoughts. Days, weeks, months passed and I couldn't hear from Gökhan. I had almost lost hope. One day when I came home from the sun, There was a tall man in a suit in the house, around 35 to 40 years old. As soon as I entered, he quickly stood up and tried to introduce himself. "Hello, I am not Sirkin." He extended his hand. "Nice to meet you." I also extended my hand. My mother came quickly from the kitchen with a very joyful manner holding coffee cups. "Look, daughter, this is Mr. Sirkin. He owns a holding company and came to offer you a good job," she said. I said, "But Mom, I don't have a diploma. I don't have any special skills. Why would this gentleman come to our door for me?" They both fell silent, but, "My daughter, Mr. Sirkin is the son of your father's old friend. He learned about our financial situation and came to our door. What more do you want? Come on, wash your face and come, he will explain the job to you," she said. That day, my mother literally destroyed herself to make me work with that man. There was good money in this job, and the man was just saying yes to whatever my mother said, repeating like a parrot. I couldn't withstand my mother's insistence any longer, and had to say yes. My new job was to be Sirkin's secretary. Although it was a boss-employee relationship at first, this man started to warm up to me officially later on. From the first day he hit on me, I resigned and came home. When my mother heard this, she dragged me inside the house and literally said whatever came to her mouth. She didn't even believe that the man hit on me. She said I was doing this because I didn't want to. One evening I saw that man called Sirkin in my dream. It felt like I was happy with him, as if I had been waiting for this man to come for a long time. That night, I was with Sirkin in my dream, and I didn't resist at all. It happened willingly. As soon as I woke up in the morning, I went to the bathroom and took a shower. After that dream, that man was constantly on my mind. I couldn't stop thinking about him. One part of me was saying this man is not suitable for you, he is immoral, while the other part kept thinking about that dream. One day I asked my mother, "Mom, is there any news from Mr. Sirkin?" My mother looked at my face and said, "What happened? Did you regret it?" "No, just asking. You know, I can't find a job anywhere. I wonder if I should go back to that workplace?" When I said this, I saw disappointment in my mother's eyes. "You had refused it, now it won't work for you. But I will ask again," she said. I replied, "Okay." The next day my mother came and said, "You are lucky again, I convinced Mr. Sirkin. I even invited him for dinner tonight. When he comes, don't say or do silly things, you are lucky again, the offer is still valid. Maybe you won't even need to work. Get your act together, the man is a holding owner. Go become the lady of the house. How long will you work, waiting for the end of the month?" she instilled in my mind. "Look at your friends, look at the girls around you, they all have sports cars. They go out and have fun every night. The price of their clothes is even higher than the money you earn in a year for your clothes. Get your act together, one day I will die and go, who will take care of you then? You will marry some fool, then what will happen? You will be left on the streets." Then I said to my mother, "It will be too late then." Actually, she was right. I also wanted to live a beautiful life, to have a car, to have countless belongings, to live the life that is a dream for some of us. I had started to dream of this life lately. My mother got what she wanted. In a short time, I was sitting at the wedding table with that man. At first, our marriage was progressing well. I was happy in every way, in every sense. However, later Sirkin started coming home late at night, even not coming at all. The man who initially told me to go out, have fun, and buy whatever I wanted, now didn't even allow me to go out of the house. This had started to upset me. I called my mother and told her what happened. She silenced me, saying everything would be fine. Despite the way Sirkin treated me, I still continued to live with him. It was as if a force was preventing me from going out that door, from leaving him, from hating him. Despite him upsetting me so much, I still lived with him and wanted to live with him. One day my mother came to us. We were going to have dinner together. Sirkin came home very late again. My mother said, Don't go to bed without your husband, don't sleep without him. Always greeted him at the door when he came. When I asked why he came so late, he grabbed my throat. He was almost going to choke me. My mother saw our argument. At first, she tried not to interfere, but later when she saw Serkan's aggressive emotions, she couldn't stand it. However, something unexpected happened. Serkan grabbed my mother's throat too and started hurling threats, saying whatever came to his mind. That night he beat my mother so much that she couldn't talk or move. I wanted to call an ambulance for my mother, but he took the phone from my hand and threw it out of the window onto the street. You won't talk to anyone, you won't see anyone. If I hear, I will line both of you up and shoot you, he said. He hardly came home properly, and when he came, he insulted and hit us. My mother was already not herself, she couldn't get out of bed for a few days. Later, unable to stand this violence, my mother called me to her side. She was crying so much that she couldn't talk. She was saying something but I couldn't understand what she was saying. I calmed her down, gave her some water, and said that everything would be fine, it would improve over time. I don't know why, but I didn't have the idea of divorcing this man in my mind. Even though my mother said let's find a way to escape, let's go to the police, let's inform someone, I was preventing it. Don't ruin my home, Mom. I don't want to separate from my husband, I was saying. I was only saying this with my tongue, there wasn't the slightest love in my heart for this man. However, I felt as if my whole life would be ruined if I separated from him. I couldn't even go outside anyway. I was constantly locked in the house. I was constantly subjected to violence. I was living a life that I didn't want at all, a life that I never dreamed of. I was living with a man who saw me and my mother as a punching bag, not as a human being. I was living with a man who turned our lives into hell. I was living with a man who didn't see us as human beings, who didn't value us, who didn't love us, who didn't respect us. I was living with a man who turned our home, which should be the safest place for us, into a place of fear, a place of violence, a place of pain. I was living with a man who turned our lives into a nightmare. I was living with a man who didn't deserve to be called a human being. I was living with a man who didn't deserve to be called a husband, a man who didn't deserve to be called a father. I was living with a man who didn't deserve our love, our respect, our trust. I was living with a man who didn't deserve to be in our lives. I was living with a man who didn't deserve us. I was living with a man who didn't deserve to be loved, to be respected, to be trusted. I was living with a man who didn't deserve to be. After that, I thought she didn't know what she was talking about, so I didn't take it seriously. Even though I told my mother to rest, and we would talk again when she felt better, she said, "You don't know, this isn't a normal binding spell. I was sacrificing a person every week for it, sacrificing Birkin so that they wouldn't harm you. This binding spell is a serious one. If I don't satisfy them every week, they will come for you. That's why I need to break this spell, I need to prevent it. I don't want anything to happen to you," she said. I looked at my mother and said, "Mom, what are you talking about? Who is going to harm me? Who are you trying to satisfy? What kind of big spell are you talking about? Mom, do you realize what you are saying?" I asked. My mother started crying and said, "That's why we need to get out. We need to leave this house immediately, otherwise they will come close, they will take you." She quickly rummaged through a few places in my room, took out amulets or something from there, quickly threw them into the toilet and flushed it. Then she kept thinking about how we could get out of the house. That night Serkan didn't come home again. My mother and I were awake alone. I told my mother that I would talk to Serkan, and I would take her home. While eating dinner, a sound of broken glass came from the room. My mother jumped and said, "What was that?" I said it might have been due to the wind, and I would check it. I stood up and went into the room to look around, but there was nothing. I came back and sat down at the table again. While my mother was eating, she suddenly paused, stood up, and went to the kitchen. I was watching her from behind, thinking she probably went to get something. I heard her talking to herself in the kitchen. I called out asking what she was looking for, but she didn't answer. I stood up and went to the kitchen. She was facing the wall, just standing there in a way. I went to her and touched her gently. She suddenly started screaming. She was hurting herself. I helped her to come to her senses. After she came to her senses, she asked me what happened and how she got there. We were eating dinner. You got up and went to the kitchen and started talking to yourself, I said. When I touched you, you screamed like this and tried to hurt yourself, I said. My mother didn't remember any of these. She said her head hurt a lot, and she needed some rest. I laid her down in bed and cleared the table. While washing the dishes in the kitchen, I heard my mother crying. I went to the bedroom. The sound was not coming from the bedroom. I realized it was coming from the bathroom. My mother had locked the bathroom door and was crying loudly inside. When I asked if she was okay and what happened, she didn't answer. She was just crying. While I was trying to open the door, strange sounds started coming from inside. These sounds didn't resemble my mother's voice. It was as if someone else was talking continuously at a fast pace, but I couldn't understand anything. Suddenly, the door opened on its own. My mother was covered in blood. Seeing her like that, I tried to enter immediately, but there were glass shards on the floor. When I stepped on them, my foot would be shattered. I would take her out if your mother was there. The strange thing was that there was nothing on her. I had no idea where Oken came from. She didn't remember what happened. She kept saying, "How did I get here? How did it happen?" I laid her back in bed and stayed by her side. It was almost midnight. Sleeplessness had hit me hard. I needed sleep. I slowly got up from beside my mother and left the room, closing the door. The moment I closed the door, I heard my mother laughing. When I opened the door and looked inside again, my mother was sleeping. I closed the door again and went out, waited to hear that sound again. When I slowly looked inside again, my mother was standing on her bed, facing the wall. This matter had started to get out of my control. When I went to her and tried to lay her down, she suddenly jumped off the bed and stood against the wall. Seeing her, I stepped back, and in the meantime, the door of the room slammed shut hard. There were voices stretching from under the bed. Terrible sounds were coming. My mother was acting very strange. I was amazed at how she stood on the wall without falling. I was very scared. I wanted to get up and leave the room, but then she started banging hard on the door from the other side. She was shouting for help, screaming for help. I collapsed in a corner of the wall, covering my ears. "I can call someone," he said. This was something. If a man comes to the house, at least I could call someone from his phone or ask this doctor for help, I thought. That night, I couldn't sleep until morning. Occasionally, I would quietly open the door of my mother's room and watch her lying motionless. This was better than her getting up and making strange movements or hurting herself. Early in the morning, when Sirkin said, "I am leaving the house," I asked when the doctor would come. "What doctor?" said my mother. "She is very sick since last night," I said. "We need a doctor for her." Sirkin went into my mother's room to check if she was alive or not, but my mother was still sleeping. She hadn't opened her eyes. "This woman is as healthy as a radish. There's nothing wrong with her, you'll see. She'll be on her feet by evening," he said and left. I felt as if my tongue was tied against him. I couldn't say anything bad. I wondered if what my mother said was true. Could he have cast a spell on me? A few hours after Sirkin went to work, our door rang. I ran to the door thinking maybe he had sent a doctor, but the person who came was not a doctor. "Your cargo order has arrived," a voice said from outside. "I did not order cargo, you must have come wrong," I said. Just as the man was about to leave, something came to my mind. I could ask that man for help. I could even ask him to call the police. When I asked the man to call the police, he hesitated. "I don't want to get into trouble," he said. I told him that my mother was sick inside and her life was in danger. But while I was saying these things, the man had already left. I had lost hope again. There was no one to help me. With each passing minute, the strange events in the house were increasing, and my mother's illness was getting worse. In the late afternoon, there was very little left for the air to bleed. I was sitting on the couch thinking about what I should do when suddenly I felt someone behind me. However, I couldn't move. It was as if I was paralyzed. Someone from behind approached me. I could feel their breath. I could feel their hands in my hair. They were stroking my hair, whispering things into my ear. As they did this, my eyes were slowly closing. I was not sleeping. I had just closed my eyes. I was aware of everything that was happening. I still felt everything. The thing standing behind me slowly came and sat next to me. They were stroking my face with the back of their hand, touching my lips. Their hands were warm. Then they started to take it off slowly. Strangely, I was enjoying this. After completely taking off what was on them, they started kissing me. I couldn't see them. I could only feel them. I couldn't respond either. There was no description of what I was experiencing. It was very beautiful. A little later, I felt that I could move again. I slowly opened my eyes. There was no one next to me. I was not naked. As soon as I opened my eyes, I went to the bathroom. I couldn't get out of the effect of what I had experienced. After taking a shower and cleaning up, I went to her room to check on my mother. She hadn't eaten anything since yesterday. I wanted her to wake up and eat something. She wasn't opening her eyes. She wasn't responding to me. After calling her a few times and struggling a lot, my mother opened her eyes. She looked around and asked, "Where am I?" "You are at my home." "Mom, you got a bit sick. You are not yourself. You have been sleeping since yesterday. Come on, get up, let's eat something." I tried to lift her up. She said she wasn't hungry. She was just very thirsty. I went to the kitchen, brought a big glass of cold water to my mother's room. She wasn't in bed. Maybe she went to the bathroom to wash her face and hands, I thought. When I went to the bathroom, I saw that she had put her head into the toilet and was drinking water from there. When I tried to lift her up immediately, I saw that there was mud instead of water in the toilet. Her face was all covered in mud. I forcibly took her out of there, washed her face and hands, and we came to the living room. "Mom, why are you doing this? Please tell me what you are feeling, what you are experiencing, what you are seeing. Who is making you do these things? Please tell me the things in your mind," I said, but my mother was no different from a dead person. She couldn't say anything. She wasn't talking. She was just making these kind of strange movements, hurting herself. I found something she could watch on TV. "Mom, don't get up from here and watch TV. I will bring you something to eat," I said. I went to the kitchen, prepared something to eat, and came to the living room. I fed her with my own hands. She hadn't put a single bite in her mouth since yesterday. Seeing her eat made me feel a bit relieved. I cleaned up and took everything to the kitchen. When I returned, I couldn't believe my eyes. My mother had vomited in the middle of the living room. When she vomited, she was crawling towards the vomit to eat it again. When she saw me, she quickly crawled towards me. She went towards the door, and after she entered that room, the door closed by itself. No matter how much I tried, I couldn't open the door. In the evening, when Serkan came home, I told him about my mother's condition. He treated me like I was crazy and said, "Go away, I am very tired." I said we needed to take my mother to the hospital. When I followed him, he started beating me with kicks and punches. He was hitting very cruelly, swearing heavily. While I was lying on the floor in pain, he went to his room as if nothing had happened. He slept. Because of what he did to me, I couldn't get up. I was lying like that in the middle of the living room. I felt him come to my bedside and circle around me. He picked me up and laid me on the couch, and started touching the hurting parts of my body. As he touched, I felt the pains decreasing. I opened my eyes but couldn't see him, I could only feel him. When I opened my eyes in the morning, there wasn't a single bruise on my body, and no part of me was hurting. At this time, I thought Sirkin had left, but with a glimmer of hope, I checked the door to see if he had locked it again. When I saw that the door was open, I was very happy. I wanted to inform my mother immediately, but first, I wanted to check if Sirkin was at home. When I entered the room, I couldn't believe my eyes. Sirkin was lying in the middle of the room covered in blood. I went to him, lifted him up, and laid him on the bed. His face was bruised. When I asked him what happened, he said he didn't remember anything. The strange thing was that I didn't feel anything for him anymore. I closed the door and left the room. That day, strange noises constantly came from Sirkin's room. Music, they handcuffed my hands. I didn't understand what was happening. Why were they catching me? What had I done? While they were arresting me, other police officers entered the rooms and came out immediately. The bodies in the room are in very bad condition, they said. They didn't keep me there any longer and took me to the police station. They asked a lot of questions that I couldn't understand. I couldn't answer any of them. I just looked around blankly and kept asking why I was there. Shortly after, they took me out of the police station and admitted me to a hospital. There, I was constantly sleeping. This continued for a long time. I don't know how long I stayed there, but when I came to myself, everything had changed a lot. When I left the hospital, I experienced spiritual troubles for a while. However, lately, I have been feeling like someone is following me. Music, when he said he knew about the events that happened and wanted to talk to me, I didn't want to. However, when he said he knew things that would interest me, I accepted. First of all, I want to tell you why I abandoned you. Your mother said she planned a future for you and told me to stay away from you. Although I didn't think of leaving you at first, I later thought that this would be the best for you. However, I still couldn't stay away from you. Even if you didn't realize it, I always stood in front of you. I wanted to see you from afar. One day, just as I was about to leave completely from in front of your house, I saw your mother hastily and hurriedly leaving the house. I don't know how right what I did was, but I followed her. She went to a house. However, she was so nervous that she kept checking her surroundings, as if she was afraid someone would see her. When I investigated whose house your mother went to, they said it belonged to a witch. Shortly after, when I heard that you married that man, the pieces in my head fell into place. Because I knew you wouldn't be with such a man. Of course, there was nothing I could do in this situation, you were already married. When I heard that you were hospitalized, I couldn't stand it and came to the hospital. What I heard about you was terrible. It seems a young man called the police and informed them. Probably a courier, because you told him my life is in danger. Help me. He called the police and asked for help. Shortly after, when the police arrived, they found your mother and Sirkin dead in their rooms. These bodies seemed to have been lying in the room for days, because they looked extremely disgusting and smelled bad. At first, they thought you performed a ritual and caused their deaths. Because there were many animal and even human bones, rotten animal flesh, and many other things in the house. It was impossible to stay in that house even for an hour. As a result of the investigations, it was understood that you didn't do it. If the truth hadn't come out, you would have been in prison for years. I went to the woman's house to talk, but it didn't happen. When I said I would go again with a police friend, she told about the spell your mother did. Your mother was insatiable and said, no matter what, my daughter should not separate from that man. The man already loves my daughter, let my daughter be bound to him forever. Apparently, due to the man's financial situation, my mother wanted this. The woman said, if you want this spell to be as you wish, you have to pay a price in your body. Without asking or listening to anything, your mother immediately wanted it to be done. A jinn was inflicted on you. For this reason, it would constantly whisper beautiful things about that man to you, confusing your mind, and make you fall in love with that man. However, if this love is not mutual, that jinn will bind you to itself and take care of you. Now I don't know what you lived through and what you went through, but I think everything is back on track," he said. I didn't react to what I heard and just walked away from there. That night, I came to my room, lay down on my bed, and just stared at the ceiling in the dark room, waiting for him. I felt his arrival. I was eagerly waiting to enjoy this moment with him. Whatever possessed me, it was making me happy. I don't know how to get rid of these. I don't even know if I want to get rid of them. I guess I got used to living like this. That's the end of the story, friends. Thank you for listening. I love you all very much. If you are not subscribed to my channel yet, you can subscribe and turn on notifications to be informed about the upcoming videos. See you in the new videos. Take care.